Now, a lot of the different acts or pieces of legislation that were put in place were meant to help the colonists pay back this enormous war debt. We've reviewed these earlier in the week, so I'm not going to spend too much time here talking about them. But just to remind ourselves, there's the Quebec Act, the Stamp Act, Quartering Act, Townshend Acts, and the Tea Act. The three most important ones to remember for what we're doing right now would probably be the Stamp Act, Townshend Acts, and Tea Act. Stamp Act, of course, put a tax on paper, where you had to have a special government stamp on any piece of paper used throughout the colonies. The Townshend Acts was a series of different acts that taxed things like tea, paint, glass, and a lot of different products that were brought in from Great Britain. And the Tea Act put a tax on, you guessed it, tea. So those are the three main ones we're going to be re-mentioning here in this PowerPoint. Also, don't forget about the Zender case. We talked about this earlier in the week as well, and don't be surprised if you're going to see that up on a mini test later on. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Make sure you have some good notes about that. If you were gone one of those days, make sure you talk to someone about that so you can get the information on the Zender case. All right, let's start with some new stuff right here. And this is where your notes are starting off from. So if you don't have your notes out, this is a good time to do it. Just a quick note, I do have Obi and Luke in here with me, and they just had a bath, and they're very curious as to why I am talking onto the computer by myself. So if you hear some noise in the background, it's them, and I apologize. I really don't have anything else I can do with them right now. All right. Now, before too long, the colonists were very, very upset with these new taxes that were being put in place, with all the different acts and pieces of legislation coming from Great Britain. The phrase that I'm sure you all heard before, taxation without representation, became a slogan that was repeated throughout the colonies. They were very upset that they didn't have a voice in what they were doing. Groups started to appear that were in defiance of these new laws or trying to change them. One of the more violent groups was called the Sons of Liberty. This is led by a guy named Samuel Adams, and I know you probably recognize that name from a commercial, but he's actually a patriot. He was a leader of the Sons of Liberty, and helped to organize protests and violent resistance to different acts that the British passed. One of their favorite tactics would be to attack tax collectors. If they could scare a tax collector into not collecting the tax, makes that law pretty meaningless. Some of the tactics that they would use would be tar and feathering someone. That's where they take a person, they cover them with tar. It's a very hot, sticky substance, and then cover them with feathers. And those feathers would then stick to the tar, and that person would be stuck that way for quite a long time. And it wasn't just a matter of humiliating that person, it would also cause very severe burns on the person's skin. And they would, be something they would remember for a long time. And so it scared many tax collectors and had them avoid taking taxes. Another tactic that they might use is burying tax collectors alive. They would keep threatening them. They'd throw them in holes. They'd say, you better stop collecting taxes or we're going to bury you. And one case got as far as dirt started getting shoveled on the person's coffin when he finally recanted and said, I won't collect the taxes. I refuse to collect taxes. So the Sons of Liberty, very, very, influential group within the colonies, especially among patriots. Their most notable act of defiance was something called the Boston Tea Party. It's one of the most famous acts performed by the Sons of Liberty. On December 16th, 1773, about 50 members of the Sons of Liberty boarded a tea ship called the Dartmouth in Boston Harbor, and they destroyed all the tea that was on board the ship. Now, the purpose of this was to show their outrage for the new tea tax that had been put in place. To give you a little background on this, actually, real quick here, just to note that there was about 90,000 pounds of tea destroyed, cost about $1 million, and the British were very furious about this.